The Handmaid's Tale felt different in Season 6, there's no denying that, and with the show recently reaching its conclusion and after now having had a few days to let that finale settle and sit with me, I've been reflecting on the season overall, and I realised that this season did feel quite different to the ones that came before it, and it seems like decisions were made with characters that changed the way that they acted. Some were written out of the show and it was never truly addressed. It's strange because I'd say that there was this cloud that loomed over the season, even if in the final few episodes it was redeemed. But at one point, this season was heading in a direction where I truly didn't know if we'd get a good ending. So with that, I thought it would be worth calling out why it felt different and what I would have done to have changed it. So let's get into it. Here is why The Handmaid's Tale Season 6 felt different. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Now, I was a fan of the finale of the show. I thought it ended in an appropriate way with June continuing her search for Hannah and us not getting that reunion that we were all hoping for. It showed the harsh reality of Gilead and that there wasn't necessarily always going to be a guaranteed happy ending for everybody. I understand that the entire show was about June searching for Hannah and hoping to be reunited with her. But with the Testaments being greenlit and being on the horizon, it kind of killed the hopes of a happy ending because we knew Hannah was going to be in that show. However, even though many people had an issue with that, my main issue with this season was the journey of how we got to the ending. For me, this season started to return to its true form at around episode 7 or 8, when June went undercover into Gilead and then also when Serena and Commander Wharton's wedding was taking place. Prior to that, I kinda just felt like the show was biding its time and just recycling through the same motions in order to get to the point where the action was going to take place. Lots of June just talking and looking into the camera. June would go into Gilead with ease, which was something that I wasn't really a big fan of because it took away the level of threat, risk and danger of crossing the border, whereas in the past we'd see her having to sneak in and it actually being a difficult thing to do, whereas this time round it would genuinely cut and she'd be inside of Gilead. So that really confused me. Once she'd get there, she'd leave after doing what she needed to do, such as when she aimed to get the papers at Jezebel's, and then she'd start working on the next plan to get in there again with Mayday. June's story just felt very formulaic in its approach, and it didn't truly go anywhere until the final episode. I'd also say that even though it was kind of predictable that June wasn't going to be reunited with Hannah, there was basically no mention of her at all from June until the final episode. Something that I found so confusing because initially the whole point of her wanting to fight Gilead and Serena was to get her daughter back. But it ultimately morphed into, let's kill the commanders and take Boston because that'll get us one step closer to Hannah. Whereas it never used to be that for June. She was always emotionally dead and almost didn't care if she died because all she cared about was being reunited with her daughter. So in this season, I don't understand why Hannah felt like a footnote. Even in episode 9, when she was looking into the eyes of the Grim Reaper, the whole Hannah arc was still on the back burner. You'd think in her final few words she might have something to say about her daughter, but she didn't. It was as if she was more interested in becoming a martyr than actually being the mother. Don't even get me started on her relationship with Nicole though, that's an entirely different issue. So when the show tried to shoehorn Hannah back into the story with June all of a sudden caring about her during episode 10, I just didn't really buy it, because that thought process had been absent for the entirety of the season. June's whole purpose, demeanor, attitude, and motive changed. And when you're 6 seasons into a show and you decide to shake that up, it's gonna cause some friction and ripple effects on the viewers. There was no focus on the Handmaids. One element of the show that I felt was always shocking to watch, but I thought was also one of the more interesting parts, was seeing Aunt Lydia and her girls. We didn't actually have a single scene with Aunt Lydia and the Handmaids in this season of the show, other than when she went to see if they were asleep, which did confuse me slightly. I understand that in the previous season, we were seeing the Handmaids from Janine and Esther's point of view. But I think seeing Aunt Lydia's mind change about Gilead because of Janine's suffering in Jezebel's, but also having her realize the actions that she's doing towards the girls were what she started to disagree with, would have been a great way for it to unfold. Aunt Lydia realizing that she was part of the problem herself whilst treating these handmaids terribly would be a great revelation, and then when confronted by Janine and June in the climax, it would carry even more weight. I also think sidelining Esther following her going into hospital in season 5 and it also being revealed what Commander Putnam did to her to then not see her at all in season 6 made absolutely no sense. She could have definitely been the perspective that we followed the Handmaids from, and it just feels a bit of a shame that a character that we all really liked was removed, and she didn't even get addressed by anybody at all. So that was a major fault on the show's side for sure. The world felt smaller. One thing I'd say about this season that I thought was a bit of a shame was that overall the episodes felt quite a lot shorter than usual, which had a knock-on effect in making the world feel a lot smaller and far more reachable. Some episodes were coming in at around 37 minutes, and when you're used to an hour, you're basically cutting the episode in half. With a shorter runtime came less time to spend exploring within the world, and it did kind of feel like whenever we'd cut from, say, June for example, to Serena, it just had this unnatural rhythm to it because the pacing just felt a bit off, and you almost couldn't tell how time was passing in the world. A lot of great character development moments come from small conversations that take place because there's time to breathe in the story, whereas I don't feel like there was much room for that in this season of the show. Take Serena and Commander Wharton. We could see that he was trying to woo her, and even though he was successful in doing so, I don't know if it's just me, but I never bought for a second that Serena was interested in him or was even in love with him. They went from being strangers to a married couple in the space of 8 episodes, so it was like a speedrun. But because there wasn't loads of time to see their relationship develop, we just got the headline conversations and never saw them actually forming a connection. So considering that relationship was a big part of the season and I didn't buy into it in the slightest, I think that's also an issue and is a direct effect of the episodes being shorter and the world ultimately feeling smaller. Luke and Nick. One thing that I didn't quite get with Luke and Nick in this season is that they felt like really inconsequential characters, despite being really influential in the past. Whilst Nick was conflicted in his approach, I was so confused by his constant yo-yoing between the two different sides. We needed more screen time with him to understand that conflict better and the dark side that was within his mind. Following him killing the Guardian on the hospital bed, I thought we'd get more time with him to see which side he was truly going to pick, but that never really arrived due to the lack of screen time. Nick and June didn't really have that much screen time together either in this season, but there were moments where June would make out with Luke in an episode and then she'd start making out with Nick in the next, and was also potentially thinking of running away with him, so I didn't really get that. Luke, on the other hand, I genuinely got no sense of chemistry between him and June in this season in the slightest. Less so than usual. There were so many occasions where Luke should have genuinely just walked away from June because of the way that she treated him, but he'd simply shout and then just crawl back. I really didn't get it. When June was literally on the stage on the cusp of dying, there was no sense of panic in Luke's eyes. He was just looking on, so I really didn't understand their relationship at the end. In the past, I felt like both of the characters' history with June was something that was always important in influencing behaviours in her and the two different sides that she'd drift between. But this time, there was none of that. There was also no debate amongst fans on who she might end up with because the romantic element was no longer there for either of them. So I thought that was a change that was a bit of a shame. I also thought having Luke go off on his own at the end and basically say, "I'll see you when we save Hannah," was a bit strange. Did she love Luke? Did Luke love her? Did she love Nick? Why did she not stay with Luke? All questions that were going around in my head that I feel like they didn't need to be. I'm not saying that I want a romance drama, but when there's been a heavy focus on who June might end up with over the years, and she ends up with none of them, like how she didn't end up with Hannah, it just felt like a weird approach for the show to take. Overall, I'd probably say that Season 6 of The Handmaid's Tale is one of the worst seasons of the show because of the reasons that I mentioned above. It just lost its identity slightly, and it also lost its direction and focus, which I think is a real shame. The world felt smaller, the characters had less time to develop, and episode 4 is a prime example of the show just going round in circles and essentially wasting our time. However, what I will say is that the final few episodes of the show, especially episode 9, is one of the best episodes that the show's ever made, so it's definitely conflicting. Will The Handmaid's Tale be remembered well? I think it probably will be, because for the most part it was a great TV series and just before the end it picked back up again. But what I will say is that the Testaments have the chance to continue this universe in the way that we remember it, so I hope that is the case. So, there you have it, why The Handmaid's Tale Season 6 felt different. If you want to see every episode of The Handmaid's Tale Season 6 being broken down, then check the playlist below. What did you think of Season 6? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.